All right, here's today's edition of Vert Athlete. We're joined by Dr. Kerry MacDonald. He's the head of sports science, sports medicine for Volleyball Canada. Kerry, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, David.
So, what we're talking about today, given what's going on, is you and I had chatted a little bit before, especially right here in the states. A lot of programs, college programs, high school programs, are getting ready to return to play. And so what we kind of want to kick off with is if you could put yourself in those shoes of whatever, a Division I college coach, what are your wise words of wisdom for, you know, ideally, if we have X amount of time, bringing those athletes back in a manner that keeps them healthy and allows them to optimize performance before that first match.
Yeah. I think in any situation like this, whenever we're returning to training, I mean, obviously this is a unique situation and a little bit different than previous ones, but I always like to try and start with what is the end goal. So I use the idea of if I'm training to run a marathon, I want to know how long the marathon is before I start training. I don't want to sign up for a marathon that's an unknown distance. So I want to know where that end target is. So in this situation, I want to know what I'm trying to get towards, which is essentially being able to play a 5-set volleyball match at a really high competitive level. Um, and then from there, I also need to understand even the density of that. So what I mean by that is how many matches per week, over time. So getting an understanding of what that end goal is and what my jump count numbers are, or jump volume, or whatever training load, or whatever terminology you want to use. What is that we're trying to get towards? So in this situation, we're talking, a Div 1 level. So there's going to be specific volumes, and those are actually going to be position specific. So we know that the load that's required for middle blockers is not the same, obviously, for liberos, and left sides and right sides are even different than middles, and setters are different again. So just understanding what that end target is a really good place to start. So at our level and at the national team, we're very confident and we understand what the 5-set match loads are by position. And so the first part is I would want to try and start there and understanding where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, let me pull this up real quick while you're talking about that. Um, so this, as you're going over it, this is, I think we took this from about 50 Division I programs, right? To your point,
Yep.
and this is the average, right? Not their kind of top line. We know that for the most part, Division I level middle blocker is max about to hit 160. Your outsides again max about 120, but on average, and this almost works itself out to a 4-set match. You're looking
Mhm.
at here, we just did it for obviously our front rows there. Middle's at about 105, and outside's at about 83 is what we want to have their capacity at the very least, I would say, ready for come game one.
Yeah, yeah. So if you have that, that's your marathon distance. Now you've set that. Then the second piece that is equally important is what is their current level. So what are they entering into? And this is actually the harder one because all of our athletes are coming from different scenarios. Some of them have maybe been able to get out and play some beach volleyball and doing some jumping activities, or maybe they're skipping rope, or they're doing some activity and they have some capacity because they have some training volume. Whereas others have maybe been doing absolutely nothing, or maybe they've been working out, but it's just been free weights, and they really haven't, been stressing their extensor mechanisms, jumping and landing. So they haven't been putting a lot of stress onto the patellar tendon. So the jumper's knee issues are something we really got to be cautious of. So understanding that and where they're at coming in is the harder part. And this is what I would say is we probably want to start a little bit more on the conservative end. And then we want to have just like a steady ramp up to our marathon. So we want to build our volume, build our capacity, and build our tolerance over time to try and get to that end zone. And so where we start is going to be individualized a little bit, and we can maybe push some a little bit more, and others we got to really dial back a little bit. And those that have maybe been doing more jumping activities, or we've been having, we feel or don't have a history. That's the other one to be cognizant of, is who has a history of chronic knee problems or shoulder problems. Those ones we need to be more conservative with. in our revamp. Those that don't have histories, we can try and maybe be a little riskier and push the envelope a little bit. And then the last thing, just to help on that though, in my opinion, one thing that we do a lot of, and I would really recommend, is the idea of doing daily pain score collection. And this is something we do with shoulders, knees, and low back every single day from every single athlete. So as we're prescribing these loads and we're ramping up to our marathon distance, we really need to understand how the athletes are reacting to them. So if we're wrong and we overprescribe and they starting to have some real pain, then we can make adaptations on the fly and we can change rapidly. And that's why I say daily, so that we can make those rapid adjustments. So that would be the foundational piece from a grand scale of how I'd be tackling this.
Okay, yeah, because I know we had discussed too a little while back when I was talking to some AVCA coaches, and they were saying like, what would kind of be the ideal scenario, right? Because coaches right now are sitting here looking to their strength coaches or athletic trainers kind of more so than ever before to start the season, and even asking a question as complex and simple as, all right, so what the heck? I've got, let's say I have 3 weeks, with them on the court. There are talks of extending it to 6 weeks, which would I think be fantastic. What number do I start at? Do I start at 30? Do I start at 70? Do I start at 40? And in the end, what we're kind of saying is where you start is going to be slightly arbitrary, right? But I think as you and I were discussing it, if we said, if you had 6 weeks and you have to almost pick a number, we are looking at, if you start at 50, 60, it gives you, 10 to 15% increase week over week. By that 6 week, we're about at those numbers I showed earlier on that screen. It's been interesting because these questions are being asked by all the coaches now. And frankly, these are things everyone should look at every season.
Yeah.
And now it's just at the forefront. So what do you think? You think they should start at 27.5 jumps?
Yeah, I mean, that exactly, right? Like we don't have that exact number. The one thing I would say is there's a lot we can do in the weight room to really help that transition to the on court. So if we know that we're only going to get a couple of weeks on court, we need to address this in the weight room. We can't wait. We're just not going to be able to ramp up fast enough in a safe enough manner to get them prepared to play in competition if we don't have that in those types of times. And one thing just to be aware of is like what we're really talking about here, whether it's chronic shoulder problems, chronic knee problems, chronic back problems, is it's for the most part, it's tissues of our body, primarily tendons, that are just really slow at adapting to change in load and developing capacity. They're slower than muscles even, right? So we just need to recognize that it's going to take time and the body just takes time. So we for sure need to address this first in the weight room if that's our first point of contact and our first level of intervention that we can get into. And so that doesn't mean jumping in and having to do plyometrics from day one. There's a lot we can do even with heavy, slow resistance exercise that can really load these tendons and whatnot to try and develop that capacity over time to help with that transition to more ballistic on-court jumping and landing activities. So for sure, more than ever, there's a real necessity to have that linkage between your S&C coach and your on-court coaches when it comes to periodizing this plan.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add on to that is with those plyos, one of the things that we've been talking to, because during this time, clients and non-clients alike, we're just having calls, trying to educate and help as best we can, is oftentimes programs run that risk of, hey, let's start out with kind of heavy plyos to get those jumps going, and the research shows there that those kind of plyos can actually cause a bigger discrepancy between muscle and tendon capacities because of that tendon adapting slower to the muscle in those kind of movements. And if you don't build up to that, again, even though you're trying to get them ready before they get on the court, it can almost backfire. So yeah, to get those really those chronic injuries, right? It's about how we're progressing them, through on the court. So yeah, I appreciate the insight there.